Hey guys, tonight we're going back. Way, way back. Picture this. The sun's barely risen over the broad, sluggish Euphrates. You're standing in sandals that never quite fit, in a robe that's permanently itchy, in the bustling streets of Ur. There's dust in your teeth, donkey traffic in every direction, and worst of all, you're furious. You ordered copper, good copper, not that flake-prone junk, and what arrived? A pile of second-rate, crumbly disappointment. Now, most people today would leave a snarky review or send a firm email, but you? You're a Sumerian around 1750 BCE, so you're grabbing a clay tablet, a stylus, and an entire evening's worth of pent-up rage. You, dear listener, are about to write the world's first known complaint letter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stare at the blank tablet, damp and cool in your hands. Clay, again. You're not even a scribe, but here you are, scribbling lines into wet earth like you work at the temple. The stylus feels clunky between your fingers. It's made of reed, trimmed just so with a triangle tip that's supposed to make tidy little wedges. Yours, though, mostly make what looks like angry bird footprints. You sigh deeply. Today started badly and didn't get better. First, your servant tripped into a goat, which caused a minor stampede through the barley stall. Then the delivery arrived. Or rather, ea-nasir's delivery arrived, and it was the final insult. You unwrap the reed matting, expecting those gleaming reddish copper ingots, but no, you get lumps. Cracked, pitted, corroded lumps that make you want to scream into the ziggurat. You pace your courtyard, muttering. Your neighbor, Arshat, glances over the fence. Still thinking about the copper? You glare. She's one of those people, smug because she ordered from a different merchant. At least your guy didn't send you copper that looks like it's been soaking in river soup, you snap. Arshat nods sympathetically, but you can tell she's not really sorry. She's just glad it wasn't her. And that's when it happens. You slam the clay down onto your writing board and decide you're writing a letter, not a friendly one, a public one, one that makes ea-nasir rue the day he tried to swindle you. The first lines come slow. You address it to ea-nasir, obviously, though part of you wants to write, "Dear useless heap of sand." But no, you're civilized. "Tell ea-nasir," you begin. "This is what Nani says." And, oh, Nanny, you are about to go off. You recount how his copper was of the lowest quality, how your messenger was treated rudely, and this is your favorite part. You remind him that you paid in advance. Prepaid. And still, you got this trash. The clay dries fast in the heat, so you have to work quickly. Each stroke digs into the tablet like tiny sighs of disappointment. It's almost cathartic, really. You add a flourish about how you'll no longer accept copper unless a royal official inspects it first. And then the best part, you make it clear this letter will be kept. Shared. Read aloud in the merchant quarter. Perhaps, historians still argue whether you meant for the letter to be publicly posted, like an ancient bulletin board grumble, or simply saved for legal purposes. Either way, it survives. An early Yelp review, baked in the fires of Mesopotamian consumer rage. You think about what might happen next. Maybe ea-nasir will come groveling with proper copper. Maybe he'll send another shipment of nonsense and a half-hearted apology. Maybe, just maybe, he'll write back. Though, frankly, you're not sure his writing's even legible. The man's a disaster with a stylus. You glance down at your hands, clay under your nails. Your back hurts from hunching. But your tablet is done. You place it gently in a wicker tray to dry, where it'll soon harden under the Babylonian sun. And who knows? Maybe, long after you're gone, some archaeologist will dig it up and read your grievances in a chilly museum, chuckling at your ancient customer fury. Just wait, you mutter, squinting at the horizon. See if anyone buys from ea-nasir after this. And somewhere, in the chaotic web of trade routes, ea-nasir sneezes. Probably because someone else just found a pebble in their copper. You're still fuming a bit, even as the tablet hardens. But since you're already in a mood, and let's be honest, this isn't your first copper-related headache, you decide to take a little walk. Not far. Just around the winding alleys of your hometown, which despite its faults has one undeniable charm. It's a bureaucracy lover's dream. From the moment you step out your gate, you're reminded of just how tracked everything is. You can't swing a broken sandal without bumping into someone cataloging barley, weighing fish, or making a tally of goats. This city lives and breathes accounting. You may not have Wi-Fi or indoor plumbing, but what you do have is paperwork. So much paperwork. You pass the local granary where a young apprentice scribe squints at a tablet, tongue sticking out slightly as he tries to correctly record 4 baskets of barley, 1 extra for priestly consumption. Poor kid. He's only on line 2 and already looks like he aged a decade. You continue on, the scent of river mud and slightly warm goat clinging to the air. Isn't flashy. The houses are packed tight, made of sun-dried bricks that crumble just a bit more every season. But inside those walls, lists, contracts, ledgers, receipts. You couldn't throw a dinner party without first documenting the lentil-to-guest ratio and who owed you oil from last time. Historians still debate whether obsession with recording came from religion, economics, or just an early version of extreme micromanagement. Likely it was all 3. Temples needed offerings tracked, merchants needed proof of deals, and kings needed to know how many bricks their citizens produced per day. You stop by a notice board, or what passes for one, a stretch of mud wall where various tablets and seals hang in baskets or get tucked into cubbies. A few people hover, muttering. Someone's cow wandered into another plot. Someone else is contesting the amount of beer they were allocated last festival. It's a weirdly cozy system of communal nitpicking. You glance at a new addition, a fresh complaint, it looks like. Something about an overcooked fish pie and a very disappointed temple priest. You chuckle. Even the gods have to deal with dry crusts now and then. Of course, not all tablets are complaints. Some are invoices, those wonderful dry-as-dust summaries of who gave what to whom. There are contracts, too, with exact stipulations. If the seller delivers 2 donkeys instead of 3, the buyer may request compensation not exceeding 2 shekels unless otherwise agreed. That kind of thing. The city's pulse is its paperwork, really. And It's not a backwater. This is the jewel of Sumer, a city that once housed over 60,000 people, stacked into courtyard homes, ziggurat temple complexes, and surprisingly crowded public squares. You pause in one such square now. The ziggurat looms above, great stairs rising to the heavens, or at least a decent view of the floodplain. Priests bustle in and out, arms full of incense or poultry or scrolls. You can't see it from here, but there's a tablet room inside the temple, filled wall to wall with dried documents. Some of them are just lists of sheep. Some are treaties. A few are curses. One is possibly a bread recipe with the word "Don't forget sesame" underlined twice. Scholars still aren't sure. You think of all the hours spent just tracking grain flows, ox leases, land swaps. It's kind of comforting in a bureaucratic way. The Mesopotamians may not have invented pizza, but they did invent the spreadsheet, just in clay. A breeze kicks up dust as you make your way back home. Your neighbor's tablet vendor has set up shop again. He's offering fresh, moist clay slates, pre-smoothed and stylus ready. One of them bears a delicate imprint of a cat paw. Limited edition, he jokes. You almost buy it. It hits you, standing there. People here didn't just write to record what happened. They wrote to prove it, to protect themselves, to nudge the future in their favor. You remember a story about a man who tried to sell the same donkey to 3 different buyers. The donkey kept braying outside, totally blowing his cover. Records stopped disputes before they started. or at least made them funnier when they inevitably happened. And in a world where there's no paper, no copy-paste, no undo button, you really had to mean it when you wrote something down. Once that tablet dried, it was history. You glance up at the late afternoon sun. Your own complaint is probably firming up nicely by now. Another artifact in Ur's ever-growing archive of mild interpersonal chaos. You stretch, yawn, and smile. No copper today, but at least you have clay, and oh boy, do you know how to use it. Back in your courtyard, the day is winding down. The sun hangs low over the rooftops, painting the mud brick walls in soft, amber hues. You sit cross-legged with a fresh slab of clay before you. Not because you have more to say to ea-nasir, though let's be honest, you always have more to say to ea-nasir, but because now that you've written one tablet, you're tempted to do another. There's something oddly satisfying about pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay, like popping ancient bubble wrap, but angrier. You grip the stylus again and squint at the tablet. You're trying to write acceptable grade copper, but instead you accidentally write something closer to goat spit. Great. You scrape the line smooth with the edge of a shell and try again. Cuneiform. It sounds elegant, doesn't it? Like something embroidered onto royal robes. But it's really just the Mesopotamian version of a clunky keyboard. It means wedge-shaped, and it's exactly that. Hundreds of little pokes poked in just the right way. And if you poke them slightly the wrong way, congratulations, you've accidentally changed friend to lice. Learning cuneiform is hard. Most people don't bother unless they have to. That's why scribes exist. Poor souls trained from childhood in the art of not mixing up the symbol for ox with the one for det. There are over 600 signs to memorize if you want to be fluent. And some of them, nearly indistinguishable unless you're squinting with divine patience and an owl's eyesight. Historians still argue whether most everyday people were functionally illiterate or just moderately clay-challenged. It's likely a mix. You, for instance, can write your name, label a jar, and clearly unleash a scathing letter. But that doesn't make you a scribe. You're more of a passionate amateur. Your own handwriting is kind of charming in a please don't show this to anyone literate sort of way. Your wedge strokes are uneven, and your spacing is erratic. But honestly, the rage really carries it. You're writing with emotion, not elegance. And it shows. Nearby, your younger cousin, barely 10, practices the same script on a wax tablet. He's copying Proverbs. You glance over and see, a poor man's sheep is full of curses. That one always gets a chuckle. Right below it, don't argue with someone more boring than you. Wise words, honestly, especially when dealing with temple clerks. Cuneiform has existed for generations by now, first as simple accounting symbols, tallying sheep and grain. But it evolved, becoming capable of full sentences, thoughts, even poetry. The Epic of Gilgamesh? All wedges. Thousands of lines of beautifully crafted existential dread, one painstaking press at a time. You watch your cousin pause to stretch his hand. Scribes used to dip their styluses in oil to smooth the motion, but at some point, everyone just decided sore wrists were part of the job. It's not uncommon for scribes to complain of stylus knuckle, though modern scholars debate whether that's a real thing or just ancient melodrama. You remember one older scribe who insisted he could tell a person's personality by how deep they pressed into clay. Light presses? Nervous soul. Heavy gouges? Control issues. Yours? Aggressively expressive. There's also the issue of mistakes. No erasers here. If you mess up badly enough, you either scrape the line clean with a reed edge or toss the whole thing into the discard pile, where misfired love poems and bad math go to die. You once saw a merchant throw an entire tablet into the canal after realizing he'd accidentally agreed to sell his own house. But the beauty of cuneiform is its durability. Unlike ink on parchment, these clay tablets, once dried or baked, last basically forever. They outlive buildings, dynasties, even empires. A little melodramatic, maybe, but it means every complaint you make could end up outlasting you. A comforting thought? Or an embarrassing one? You stare down at your half-written draft, smirking. The wedges may not be perfect, but they're yours. And for once, you don't even mind the crooked lines or blotchy spacing. It's cathartic, this odd process of turning frustration into something tangible. Something you can hold, slam down with a flourish, and say, "There, that's my opinion, and I baked it." You hear a vendor in the street shout something about fresh onions, and the spell breaks. Your fingers ache slightly, and your back reminds you that sitting hunched for 2 hours is not, in fact, something humans were built for. You stretch again, arms high, and glance around. The courtyard is quiet now, the air cooling as twilight creeps in. You gently set your second tablet aside next to the first. Tomorrow, maybe you'll send them to the scribe office for archiving. Or maybe you'll hand one directly to a caravan headed toward ea-nasir's compound. You're still deciding how much drama you want to inject. One thing's clear, though. Writing is power. Even here. Even now. Even when it's just a letter about copper that flakes like old fish skin. You wake up the next morning to the braying of donkeys and the faint aroma of barley porridge, boiling somewhere nearby. Another day in Ur, another chance to wonder what exactly happened to your copper. You eat quickly, tying your belt with one hand while absent-mindedly kicking a sleeping chicken out of your doorway. Today, you've decided, is the day to find out where your shipment went so wrong. You make your way through the early morning bustle, heading toward the merchant quarter where traders from far-off lands unload wares that smell like sea salt, incense, and sometimes mild regret. The streets are already a blur of linen robes, loud haggling, and carts pulled by donkeys that appear to resent every life decision leading to this moment. Your target is the caravan dispatcher, an older man with a beard like a broom and a memory like a steel trap. He once recited an entire shipment history just to prove a point. You approach, dodging a runaway melon cart, and give him your best, "I'm trying to stay polite, but I may scream" expression. "Morning," you begin. "I'm tracking a copper delivery." "It was supposed to arrive from Dillman." He raises an eyebrow. "Ah, Dillman." He says it the way people say dentist or swamp fever. Dillman, to be fair, is a respectable trading port. Or was. Historians still argue whether it was in modern Bahrain or Qatar. Either way, it was known for copper, dates, and the occasional merchant with strong opinions about sheep. You learn that your shipment did arrive, technically, but instead of coming in with the royal merchant convoy, it got lumped into a private caravan managed by, who else? Ea-nasir. This man is like a bad smell in the spice market. The dispatcher flips through his clay tablet stack, squinting. Here it is. Arrived 3 days ago. 6 copper ingots. Signed for by your servant, correct? You wince. Former servant. He nods slowly. Ah, the one who tried to tip a porter with a dried fig and got slapped with a sandal. That tracks. Caravans, you know, are the lifeblood of Mesopotamian trade. They crawl across the land, slow as a sick turtle, but steady. Donkeys plod along well-worn paths, sometimes for weeks. A shipment from Dillman to Ur could take a month if weather, bandits, or gossip delays got in the way. And there are always gossip delays. You've seen entire convoys stop just to argue about the price of lentils in Eridu. You imagine your copper on that long journey, jostling in a wicker basket, baking under the sun, absorbing the complaints of every merchant, camel handler, and scribe along the way. Merchants travel in groups not just for safety, but for efficiency. You can picture them clustered around a fire at night, arguing about tariff rates and which city has the worst beer. It's not glamorous. It's dust, sore feet, and endless counting. One traveler you met years ago told you about the donkey whisperer of Sipper, a man who claimed to calm beasts by singing them love songs. The man had no donkeys and even fewer teeth, but the image stuck with you. Caravans carry more than goods. They carry gossip, diseases, marriage proposals, curses, and sometimes regret. You once heard of a shipment of cedarwood so delayed that by the time it arrived, the house it was meant for had already collapsed. A classic Mesopotamian punchline. You nod at the dispatcher who hands you a copy tablet of the shipping record. There it is, your copper, logged, recorded, and confirmed. Except what you received was closer to shiny disappointment in mineral form. Who inspected the goods on arrival, you ask? He taps his chin. Ea-nasir's assistant, that wiry one with the permanent scowl. Perfect. The least reliable man in Sumer was involved in both the shipping and the inspection. You mutter thanks and leave the office, the copy tablet tucked under your arm. As you walk, you consider your next steps. Maybe you'll speak to a temple official. Maybe you'll start engraving curses into river stones just to feel something. Historians still debate whether the merchant routes were centrally regulated or more like controlled chaos. Probably both. One day, there's a royal inspection team checking your grain measures. The next, you're bribing a local official with dried dates just to move a cart through the gate. Trade worked because people needed it to, not because it was neat. Goods crossed deserts, rivers, and borders. They came wrapped in palm leaves, carried in baskets, balanced on donkey backs, or dragged on sledges. And sometimes, like your copper, they arrived in a state that could best be described as emotionally disappointing. You pause at a shady corner near the marketplace and run your fingers across the shipping tablet's surface. Your complaint letter may be drying in your courtyard, but the story behind it keeps unfolding, one bumpy donkey trail at a time. You shake your head and sigh. Next time, you mutter to yourself, I'm just ordering from Enlil's boy. You're back home, cross-legged beside your half-dry complaint tablet, staring at it like it owes you copper. Which, in a roundabout way, it does. Your fingers itch with the need to add one more line. Something dramatic, something bold. But you've already signed off in the standard way. May ea-nasir correct his dishonor and bring acceptable copper. There's etiquette to consider even when being petty. You trace the grooves with your finger. It feels good. Like the grooves in an old cutting board, worn by time and irritation. There's something strange about knowing this object might outlive every structure in the city. You almost hope it does. And who, you ask, is this ea-nasir? You didn't know him well before this disaster, but now his name echoes through your mind like a badly tuned lyre. The man is a copper merchant, or so he claims. Lives near the edge of the merchant district, in a home just fancy enough to imply overcharging. He inherited the trade from his father, a more respectable man who, according to legend, once gifted a customer a bonus ingot just because it smelled like rain. That kind of reputation built trust. Ea-nasir, on the other hand, is more famous for haggling over grain sacks and selling discounted copper that is already oxidized in the bag. You think back to the delivery day. The servant he sent, a sour-faced boy with a runny nose, dropped the copper at your feet and scuttled away like a crab. The lumps barely glinted in the sun. You tapped one, and it crumbled like old bread. No apology, no note. Not even a passive-aggressive, hope this suits your expectations. Just copper you wouldn't use to weight down a fishing net. Historians still argue whether ea-nasir truly deserved the full force of Mesopotamian wrath, or whether he was just an unlucky middleman in a delayed supply chain. But, let's be honest, you saw the copper. If anything, your complaint was generous. Your friends have stories, too. Shala claims she received a shipment of tin from him that turned out to be mostly pebbles. Amu swears one of his ingots had a tooth embedded in it. You're not sure if he's exaggerating, but at this point, would it surprise you? You take a walk, heading toward ea-nasir's house. Not to confront him, no, you're not ready for that kind of drama before breakfast, but just to look. His home is predictably smug. carved lintels, an overwatered potted fig tree by the door, and an obnoxiously symmetrical pebble pathway. You stand there for a moment, imagining the letter being delivered. Would he read it and scoff? Toss it into his grievances I'm ignoring basket? Or perhaps, just perhaps, he'd sit there, reading your carefully chosen wedges and feel the sting of well-worded disappointment. More likely, he'd blame his assistant. There's no mailman, of course. Delivery is a chaotic mix of errand boys, traveling scribes, and whoever you can bribe with half a loaf of stale bread. You're considering who to recruit when a temple scribe walks by, basket of tablets under his arm, looking bored. "Hey," you call out, "how much to deliver a complaint?" He glances at the tablet in your hand. "How angry?" "Extremely." "1 barley cake in a future favor." You nod. Done. You hand it over and watch him walk away, whistling a hymn to Nana, the moon god, as if he weren't holding 500 words of righteous fury. It's comforting, really. You're not alone in this. Across the city, across the centuries, someone is always drafting a strongly worded message to a merchant with a creative interpretation of the word quality. It makes you think. The invention of writing wasn't just about laws and epics. It was about this. People trying to communicate expectations, frustrations, dignity. You've joined a very specific tradition. Customer service gone archaeological. You wonder what ea-nasir's reply will be like, if he replies at all. Perhaps he'll send a snide message about the humidity affecting copper. Maybe he'll offer a replacement ingot made of slightly less disappointment. Or perhaps he'll simply go quiet, hoping your rage dries out faster than the clay. But here's the beauty of tablets. They're permanent. While spoken words drift into the desert wind, your tablet stays. It sits. It waits. Even if ea-nasir ignores it, others will read it. You've told your story. It's etched now, not just into clay, but into memory. You return home and make yourself a small meal. Dates, flatbread, and a sliver of soft cheese that, thankfully, did not come from ea-nasir. You chew thoughtfully, watching the shadows grow longer. Your letter is out in the world now. ea-nasir will have to face it. Or dodge it. Either way, your message has weight. Not just literally, clay is heavy, but spiritually. And for the first time in days, you feel calm. Not satisfied exactly, but at peace. Because when words fail, wedges speak. There's a certain joy in thumping wet clay with intent. Not many people talk about it, but you're convinced it's part of the appeal. That deep, faintly satisfying plop when you press a stylus down just right. That gentle squish when you turn a blank slate into something, well, less blank, and significantly more judgmental. You're not alone in this strange little subculture of Mesopotamian expression. In fact, walk through the scribe district of any big city like Ur or Nippur, and you'll find entire workshops humming with the quiet rhythm of clay complaints being immortalized. Today, you've got errands to run, but you can't resist a detour into the scribe's quarter. A shaded alley where clay dust floats lazily in the air and everyone smells faintly of damp reeds. The scribes here are a peculiar breed. Thin wrists, ink-stained robes, and the look of people who've spent most of their lives squinting at tablets under oil lamps. Some have permanent stylus calluses. Others have developed the eerie habit of mouthing wedge shapes in their sleep. You peek through a doorway where an apprentice is being berated for accidentally writing 10 goats owed instead of 10 goats owned. You can imagine the fallout from that little typo. Tables line the walls, each covered in half-dried tablets, reed brushes, clay scraps, and that one guy who always insists on working cross-legged even though there are perfectly good stools available. You spot a familiar figure, Kulu, a mid-tier scribe with a flair for drama. His specialty? Complaint tablets. The man writes with a theatrical flair that turns every grievance into performance art. You once saw a tablet he wrote on behalf of a weaver that read more like a breakup letter than a customer dispute. It ended with, "May your looms twist as your words do." Magnificent. You approach and greet him. He's hunched over a slab, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he writes, and you insult my honor with this wine that tastes of swamp regret. Classic Kulu. Another love letter? You tease. He doesn't look up. A vintner sent sour wine to the temple. The high priest has opinions. You nod. I just sent a complaint to ea-nasir. Copper issues? Kulu whistles. You and everyone else this season. Turns out yours wasn't the only unhappy delivery. Apparently 2 other customers have already fired off scathing tablets. One even drew a tiny frowning donkey next to the complaint. No one's quite sure why, but it feels appropriate. Historians still debate how common written complaints were in the ancient world. Some argue they were rare, formal affairs. Others believe they were just one part of a broader system of transactional back and forth. But here, among the scribes, complaints are the most fun, and the drama. You overhear one scribe reading aloud a recent message. You have disgraced not only your name, but your mother's cooking pots. Harsh. Personal. Effective. What's even more entertaining is the variety. Some customers wax poetic, others are all business. One simply wrote, "This was not bread. It was insult." You wander the workshop admiring the shelves filled with drying tablets. The air smells of clay and ink and faint ego. Each tablet is a miniature world, a squabble, a story, a spat that someone cared enough to etch forever. One corner shelf holds practice complaints. Apprentice scribes often practice their skills by writing hypothetical grievances. This goat is untrustworthy. Your barley is haunted. My sandals fell apart mid-ceremony. Explain yourself? There's a creative pride to it. The stylus swirls, presses, flicks. Good scribes are artists as much as clerks. The spacing, the rhythm, the way the wedges line up like little armies of indignation. It all matters. You ask Kulu how many complaints he writes in a week. He shrugs. Some days I write more fury than barley records. He pauses. Honestly, I prefer it. Anger is easier to stylize. You leave the workshop as the sun reaches its peak, the streets bright and squint-inducing. A boy runs past carrying a tablet in a cloth wrap, probably en route to deliver someone's formal grievance about undercooked lentils or a stolen goat. You think about your own letter. It's probably being read by now. Maybe ea-nasir is laughing. Maybe he's pacing his courtyard, muttering about ungrateful clients. Maybe he's hurling your tablet across the room, where it lands with a dusty thunk. The funny thing is, no matter his reaction, you've already won something. You've joined a lineage, not just of customers and merchants, but of people who decided that if life is going to disappoint you, it might as well be documented. Clay tablets, you realize, are emotional fossils. And as you wander back toward your home, the late afternoon shadows lengthening behind you, you feel oddly light. You're part of a long, proud tradition of people who knew that sometimes the best way to respond to life's little injustices is with wedges. By now, you're practically a connoisseur of Mesopotamian displeasure. You've written your own angry letter, wandered through the scribe quarter like a judgmental cat, and heard everything from wine-based slander to sandal critiques. But there's a whole other side to this world of words. The scribes themselves, the quiet middlemen of ink and irritation. And oh, do they have stories. You decide to spend the afternoon with your friend Taram Eli. She's one of the few female scribes in the area, a sharp mind with faster hands than anyone you know. She works from a shaded nook in her family's home, now surrounded by clay shards, styluses of varying sharpness, and a small tortoise named Sir Bitumen, who guards the tablet pile like a sleepy sentry. You arrive with 2 sweet rolls, the price of admission for her stories. She's already working on something, a contract between a brewer and a barley farmer. The margins are filled with tiny doodles, likely her apprentice being creative. In one corner, a duck appears to be wearing a crown. Classic. So, she says without looking up, how's your copper situation? Flaky, emotionally and literally. She chuckles. Let me guess. ea-nasir. You nod solemnly, and she puts her stylus down. Tarim Ely has been ghostwriting for people across the city for years. Complaint letters, love notes, land disputes, you name it. Her favorite? That time a nobleman wanted to send a very polite letter that secretly insulted the recipient's eyebrows. She explains that when crafting a truly great complaint, you don't just say what's wrong, you set the tone. You frame it. Should the message come across disappointed? Outraged? Casually superior? Tone is everything. Historians still debate the role of scribes in shaping tone, whether they were mere transcribers or co-authors. Tarim Ely leans toward the latter. You think half these merchants could spell deception without help? She says, grinning. You ask if she ever exaggerates. She leans in conspiratorially. Sometimes I add a flourish. If someone says the copper was bad, I might write, it was so shameful, the gods turned away. It helps. You raise an eyebrow, she shrugs. People pay for drama. As you watch her work, you notice the rhythm to it. Press, lift, turn. A beat that becomes second nature. Scribal work is slow, meditative, and quietly intense. She pauses often, not because she's unsure, but because she's imagining the recipient's reaction. I once wrote a tablet, she says, where I slipped in a pun about donkey breath. Subtle, but satisfying. You're curious, does she ever get repeat clients? Oh yeah, she says. There's this one woman, bless her temper, who sends monthly updates to her ex-husband about how well her new oxen are performing. That might be the Mesopotamian equivalent of posting gym selfies after a breakup. You ask how scribes deal with difficult customers. We nod, we write. We bill extra for emotional exhaustion. She offers you a stylus to try writing again. Your wedges are still inconsistent, like someone trying to imitate bird footprints with a potato. But she encourages you. People think it's about the symbols, she says. It's not. It's about the weight behind them. You try to write, this is a very fine cheese. It comes out more like, this is a squashed fish. She doesn't correct you. Cheese is subjective, she says with a wink. As the afternoon stretches on, a light breeze kicks up clay dust through the open window. Sir Bitumen lumbers over to a shadowy corner, unimpressed by your scribal potential. Tarim Ely brings out a small jar of oil and rubs it on her stylus tips, a trick to keep the reed smooth and the clay gliding easily. You hadn't thought of that. You'd been stabbing your tablets like they were ea-nasir himself. Here, she says, handing you a practice tablet. Write something petty. It helps. You hesitate, then scrawl. Your donkeys are slow, and so is your brain. It's deeply satisfying. You look up and she's smiling. There, she says. Now you're one of us. You grin, tablet in hand. There's something deeply human about all this. The clay, the complaints, the slow grind of trying to be heard in a world that mostly runs on noise. And somewhere out there, ea-nasir may be reading your tablet, fuming, scribbling a response of his own. Maybe he'll even hire a scribe like Tarim Ely. Maybe she'll slip in a donkey pun just for you. By the next morning, your satisfaction has cooled just slightly, like yesterday's lentil stew. You're still proud of your clay-carved fury, but you've begun to wonder, how exactly does all of this fit into the bigger picture? After all, your complaint didn't just go to ea-nasir. It passed through a system, one older, dustier, and more passive-aggressive than any bureaucracy you've ever encountered. So today you turn your attention to the one place where every shekel, goat, onion, and yes, copper ingot is tracked. The temple. You're not going there to pray, mind you. You're going to marvel at the ledger system that keeps the entire city breathing. Temples in Mesopotamia aren't just houses of worship. They're economic engines. Picture a mix between a bank, a warehouse, and a notary's office. And also a bit of a social club, if you count the scribes eating pickled turnips in the courtyard. The high priest oversees everything, of course, but beneath him is a teeming cast of scribes, tax collectors, granary managers, and clay-stained workers who spend their days turning donations and tithes into administrative poetry. You walk through the outer gate and immediately notice the sound. The rhythmic tap-tap scrape of styluses across clay. It's strangely soothing, like bureaucratic rain. The temple stores everything from barley to beads, and every single transaction is recorded. You spot a scribe writing 4 jars of sesame oil for the goddess's eyebrow ritual. Somewhere else, another writes, 2 goats offered for a successful dream. You're still not sure what counts as a successful dream, but you admire the dedication. One priestess nods at you as she passes with an armful of fresh tablets. You follow her to the records room, a long, cool chamber lined with shelves of clay. Here, history sleeps. If history were extremely detail-oriented and very concerned about onion quotas, historians still argue about how centralized this record-keeping really was. Did each temple act independently, or were there overarching systems? Were the scribes trusted officials, or just really organized gossips? Hard to say. But what's clear is this. Temples ran the economy like a giant, sacred spreadsheet. You pause beside a table where a young scribe is working on tax records. His assignment? Recording which farmers owe onions this month. Onions. A surprisingly common form of tax payment. You try not to laugh as he carefully notes, Ramu of the Canal District, 10 onions short. Penalty pending. You imagine some poor man trudging through town, sack of onions over his shoulder, muttering about unfair assessments and how the gods clearly don't need that many garnishes. You ask a clerk how copper fits into all this. She pulls out a tablet and shows you. Donations of raw copper to the temple are noted by weight, source, and purity. If the copper is bad, the priest can reject it outright. Apparently, the gods are quite particular, so if ea-nasir had tried pawning off his low-grade wares here, he'd have been politely cursed and asked never to return. There's even a rumor of a priest once sending a complaint letter back to a merchant, with the drawing of a frowning statue on it. No one knows if it was meant to be symbolic or just petty. Either way, a masterpiece. You continue exploring and find the storage vault, where copper ingots are stacked like loaves of bread. Some gleam with reddish fire. Others are dull, flaky, suspiciously familiar looking. You resist the urge to poke one. Nearby, another scribe is hard at work drafting contracts for temple laborers. Turns out the gods demand daily offerings, and those don't gather themselves. There's a rotating staff of harvesters, cooks, cleaners, and incense burners. All paid in grain, or oil, or, again, onions. Taramalai was right. Writing is power. If you're not literate, you're dependent on someone else to tell your story, or keep your records accurate. You could swear you heard someone grumbling earlier. I gave them 12 onions, not 10. This is how feuds start. You make a note to double-check your own barley taxes. By mid-afternoon, the scribes are breaking for lunch. Flatbread, pickled vegetables, some sour beer that smells like something between vinegar and fate. One of them waves you over, recognizes you. You're the ea-nasir letter, right? You blink. Yes? He grins. It's making the rounds. Half the scribes have read it by now. That last line about the dignity of trade deserves better. Solid. Very sharp. You didn't even write that part. Taram Eli must have slipped it in. You thank him anyway and float out of the temple on a quiet cloud of bureaucratic fame. Your complaint has become a sensation in the world of temple admin? You can't help but smile. It's small, it's petty, but it worked. Back home, you rest in the shade, sipping warm beer and watching the sky shift into gold. You think about onions, copper, and the strange comfort of knowing that somewhere in the temple, someone is cursing over a miscounted sheep. You're not alone in your frustrations, and if anything goes wrong again, you know exactly what to do. Grab clay, find stylus, start writing. Later that evening, as the sky purples into dusk, and the streets of Ur grow quieter, less donkey braying, more distant lullabies, you sit outside with your feet up and your thoughts lingering on copper. Why, you ask yourself, did this silly little metal cause so much trouble in the first place? Time to explore the truth. Copper was the duct tape of the Bronze Age. You reach for a copper bowl beside you and turn it over in your hands. It's dented, a bit scratched, but it gleams just enough in the fading light to remind you that, yes, this was once the crown jewel of metallurgy. In a world without steel or iron, copper was king. It's not hard to see why. Soft enough to shape, strong enough to be useful, and shiny enough to make people feel fancy. Copper could be turned into tools, weapons, bowls, pins, fish hooks, mirror frames, and, if you were really desperate, makeshift knuckle dusters for a temple brawl. You've heard stories. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamia had its own sufficient copper deposits or relied mostly on imports from places like Oman or Anatolia. Either way, getting your hands on it meant navigating the very trade routes that brought you your less than impressive delivery. And the demand? Huge. Without copper, there's no bronze. And without bronze, you don't get plows, axes, or ceremonial eyebrow razors. Even the temple incense burners are copper, shaped with care and lined up like sleepy little turtles at sunrise. You stroll over to your storeroom, lighting a small oil lamp. Inside, your shelves hold bits and pieces of your household's copper stash. A bent ladle, a cracked blade, a curious ornament shaped like a hedgehog with attitude. Copper was wealth, not gold-level wealth. Mesopotamians weren't that flashy. But copper was the currency of doing. If gold was for burial masks, copper was for living. You remember your uncle's story of the time he gifted his bride a copper hairpin set. He'd saved for a year. She broke one within a week opening a date jar. It was considered an omen. They're still married somehow. Even religious rituals leaned heavily on copper. The gods you see are picky. They like shiny things. It's believed that some temple idols were cast in copper alloy, polished daily by apprentices who now probably haunt the hallways, grumbling forever about elbow grease. You look down at your own copper blade, the one you use for cutting dried fish. It's worn, but it works. Imagine a time when that blade wasn't an option. Before copper, people used obsidian or flint. Sharp, yes. Durable, not so much. A chipped obsidian knife might cut well, but drop it once and you're back to gnawing through ropes with your teeth. And that's just household use. In the city, artisans and smiths form their own network. Copper crafters who hammer all day long in smoky workshops filled with the soft ring of metal on stone. You know one of them. Da-do-tu, a squat man with wrists like tree trunks and the gentlest voice you've ever heard. He once carved an entire lion out of copper wire to impress a priestess. It didn't work, but he still has the lion. It watches customers silently from his shop shelf. You once asked him what made a good ingot. He just said, solid color, no grainy bits, and it shouldn't smell like defeat. That's why ea-nasir's delivery was so insulting. It wasn't just bad, it was shamefully bad. You weren't being picky. You were being reasonable. The worst part? Bad copper isn't always obvious. Some of it looks fine until you try to work it. Then it flakes, cracks, or just crumbles in your hand like a cookie made of sadness. And since copper was often alloyed with tin to make bronze, quality control was key. Too much tin. Brittle. Too little. Too soft. Just right. Ah, the Goldilocks zone of metallurgy. You take a moment to gaze into the bowl you've brought outside, watching it catch the flicker of your lantern flame. It's peaceful, this moment. You imagine ancient smiths hunched beside their own flickering fires, melting down the day's troubles into something useful. It's no wonder people got emotional about copper. It was wrapped into every aspect of life. Tool, trade, tradition. No copper meant no farming blade, no comb, no hook for catching river fish. No copper meant no business, and in your case, bad copper meant war. Stylus war. You chuckle softly to yourself. Even your complaint letter is a kind of copper artifact now. Crafted with effort, shaped with fire, meant to serve a purpose. To hold something together. Whether it's a broken trade agreement or your own simmering sense of pride. That's the irony, you realize. Copper was for fixing things, holding them, making life smoother. And yet, here you are using it, indirectly, to vent about life coming undone. You run your thumb along the bowl's rim. Solid. Sturdy. You sigh, content for a moment, thinking maybe you'll visit Dedutu tomorrow. See if he's got any copper scraps for a new ladle. Something handmade. Something reliable. Something not from ea-nasir. The next morning, you're back on the move, this time with a purpose. You've decided to send another message. Not to ea-nasir. No, this one's going somewhere farther, someplace where messages matter. Mari. Or perhaps Sipar or Larsa. Frankly, you're not even sure which direction your recipient lives in. But that's never stopped anyone in this city from writing something ambitious and shoving it onto a donkey. But before you can send anything, you have to confront the reality of ancient Mesopotamian mail. And let's be clear, there's no neat little red box with a flag. No royal courier picking up your words and delivering them sealed in scented parchment. No raven flapping by with poetic timing. What you do have is clay, string, seals, and an endless reliance on strangers with donkeys. You return to the scribe quarter, this time carrying a wrapped tablet you wrote last night. Just a little note to a cousin in Larsa, venting about copper and asking if he's had better luck with local merchants. You find a delivery clerk lounging in the sun, gnawing on a date pit. "I need this tablet delivered," you say. He raises an eyebrow. "Where to?" "Somewhere southeast, near the temple of Shamash. The cousin's name is Atur." He nods slowly. "That's 2 stops. 1 courier exchange and a day's wait in Ummah if the donkeys are stubborn." "Are they ever not stubborn?" He doesn't answer, just whistles through his teeth and waves down a boy loading baskets of figs onto a cart. This is your mail system, a tangled network of merchants, messengers, temple staff, and anyone willing to carry something for a few shekels or a handful of dried fruit. There's no central authority, no return address, no guarantee. Historians still argue how formalized this system really was. Some say temple scribes created a kind of postal bureaucracy, while others suggest it was a glorified game of pass the parcel, with occasional divine assistance. What is clear is this: if your tablet is valuable, legally, religiously, or politically, you wrap it, not in cloth. Number? You create a clay envelope. Yes, that's a thing. You take a soft slab of clay, wrap it around your tablet like a warm pita, and stamp the outside with your seal. That way, if someone tampers with it, it's obvious. Inside? Your original message remains untouched. It's like 2-factor authentication, but with mud. You ask the delivery clerk for sealing wax out of habit and immediately regret it. "This isn't the Indus Valley," he mutters, handing you a fresh reed stylus instead. Fair enough. You roll your seal across the envelope's surface. Your family emblem, a stylized bull with an eyebrow that looks vaguely judgmental. It's deeply satisfying. Almost makes you want to seal things for no reason. Bowl of lentils, sealed. Passive-aggressive message to your neighbor? Sealed twice. You learn quickly that couriers often carry multiple tablets at once, strapped to donkeys, tucked into baskets, or slung across their backs. Some are tiny notes. Others are multi-pound epic rants against unpaid temple wages, or a marriage proposal from someone deeply in love but tragically unable to spell fertility. Once, a courier accidentally dropped a basket of legal documents into a canal. Legend has it the tablets were later found and used as skipping stones, which is both tragic and oddly charming. You decide to tip your courier generously, 2 shekels and a small cake wrapped in a palm leaf. He seems pleased. The donkey less so. You watch as your message disappears into the crowd, jostling between baskets of leeks and a group of children, chasing a goat wearing what appears to be a ceremonial necklace. You return home and settle into your courtyard, sipping cool water and wondering how many messages have actually arrived in full, unbroken, properly translated glory. Probably fewer than anyone admits. But here's the thing. Even without efficiency, the system worked. Messages got there. Maybe late. Maybe smudged. Maybe with extra commentary scribbled in the margins by bored couriers. But they arrived. You've heard of one temple letter that traveled from Babylon to Elam, took nearly 3 months, and was returned with a single line. "We do not recognize your priest." Ouch. Still, there's something elegant in the process. A quiet dignity. Words, your words, traveling across wind-blown plains and muddy canals, through cities you've never seen, arriving in hands that might laugh, curse, or cry. You glance at your fingertips, still stained with clay. You think about the messages sent every day. Love notes, legal disputes, trade deals, prayer requests, bizarre questions about missing chickens. In this world, writing isn't just power, it's movement. A voice stretched across distance and time. And tonight your voice is out there too, wrapped in clay, sealed with a bull eyebrow. Clipped to the side of a donkey that may or may not have a sense of direction. It's enough to make you smile. Because even in this ancient, dusty corner of the world, people found a way to stay connected. Through trade, through tablets, through tired, sunburned couriers with a fondness for sweet cakes. You stretch out under the stars, arms behind your head, and wonder if ea-nasirs ever had a letter go missing in the mail. Hopefully yours doesn't. The morning arrives with the usual noise. A rooster screaming its personal tragedy into the wind, a pot clanging from a neighbor's window, and someone cursing loudly about a sandal strap. It's oddly comforting, like the city reminding you that no matter your problems, at least you didn't step in goat dung before breakfast. But your mind isn't on sandals today. It's still chewing, metaphorically, on ea-nasir and his pitiful excuse for copper. And it dawns on you that while you chose the noble, tablet-etched path of civil complaint, others in your position might have taken different measures. So today, let's explore something delightful. When customer service meant cursing someone's donkey. You've heard the stories, of course. Everyone has. The fishmonger who sprinkled sand into a priest's order and found himself the subject of 3 weeks of templeside shade. The wine seller who reused his amphorae without proper rinsing. Someone swore they saw him grow a rash shaped like the goddess Inanna's foot. Coincidence? Probably. Entertaining? Absolutely. Revenge in ancient Mesopotamia was often creative. Legally creative, even. You stop by the scribe quarter again. Taram Eli greets you with a smirk. "Let me guess," she says. "You want to write a curse tablet?" You grin. Purely hypothetical. She rolls her eyes and gestures for you to sit. Hypothetically, then, let's talk options. Now, officially, temples frowned upon curses unless sanctioned by priestly authorities. But unofficially, there were plenty of ways to get your point across. The most popular? Symbolic acts. Burying a clay figurine of the offender upside down, for instance, was said to invite bad luck. Specifically, stubbed toes and disappointing lentils. Others wrote short invocations to the gods on tiny tablets and left them by the river, hoping Enki might forward them to the proper celestial department. Historians still argue how seriously people took these curses. Were they acts of true magical belief or just emotional venting? Either way, they felt good. Taram Eli shows you a sample curse tablet once copied by a temple scribe. It reads, "May ea-nasir's donkeys wander and his sandals never fit. May his copper tarnish before it sees sunlight, and may the marketplace always run out of onions when he arrives." That's poetry, and you feel it. It's not just revenge, it's personal, everyday inconvenience leveled like a soft slap from the universe. But if subtle sorcery isn't your style, there were also more earthly solutions. You've heard tales of irate buyers staging public readings of their complaint tablets. Standing in the square, loudly intoning every single wedge with theatrical gasps and disappointed headshakes. Can you believe this? The copper you sent was not good. Not good. And this after I sent a royal inspector. Nothing ruins a merchant's week like customers whispering, "He's the one from the complaint tablet." One woman in the next district famously walked through the market wearing her broken weaving comb on a string around her neck, pointing at the seller's stall and dramatically sighing every time someone asked where she bought it. Then there's the use of mock offerings. It's said that occasionally someone would leave a gift at the temple, meant not for the gods, but for public opinion. A cracked bowl, a lump of oxidized copper, a note. I received this from ea-nasir. I offer it to the divine spirits of better trade. You're not saying you should do that, but you're also not saying you shouldn't. Still, legal channels existed too. If a dispute got bad enough, people could bring complaints to local judges or city elders. Contracts were examined, tablets read, witnesses summoned. Usually things were settled with fines, trade reversals, or deeply awkward public apologies. You pass the town square and imagine it. ea-nasir standing beside a priest, reciting the phrase, "I acknowledge the copper was unsuitable and I regret the offense it caused." The audience politely applauding, a donkey braying dramatically in the background. You smile, because even if you don't pursue curses or courtroom drama, you could. And sometimes just knowing that a tiny clay figurine with his name on it might be buried beneath the gatehouse, well, that's its own kind of justice. As the sun climbs higher, you walk past a little shrine tucked beside a bakery. A few old offerings sit inside. Flowers, breadcrumbs, a small toy donkey with a missing leg. You slip a fig into the basket, whispering, "May my trade be fair, and my copper less insulting." Then you add in a quieter voice, "And if ea-nasir drops his tablet into a well, so be it." You continue your walk, satisfied, your footsteps lighter. You didn't need to curse his donkey outright, but you could have. And that really is what makes you powerful. The days pass. Warm breezes carry the scent of baked clay and sun-dried dates. The city hums with its usual chaos. Shouting vendors, arguing scribes, flustered priests trying to calculate how many ducks are owed to the moon god this week. Life goes on. And somewhere out there, perhaps tucked in a merchant's chest or tossed under a workbench, your complaint tablet to ea-nasir sits, still drying in the heat, still brimming with carefully pressed wedges of righteous irritation. You nearly forget about it. Nearly. Until one afternoon you're invited to a gathering at the house of a friend, a well-known potter who has recently stumbled into a side gig, collecting weird tablets. Not for legal reasons. Not for temple records. Just for fun. You arrive to find a group of people lounging on reed mats, passing around a freshly discovered letter. It's chipped at the corner, slightly warped, but still readable. The host, grinning, waves you over. "Hey," he says, "check this out. It's another ea-nasir complaint." You blink. You're kidding. He isn't. There it is in beautifully dramatic wedges. "I traveled all the way to your residence and was greeted with contempt. The copper you sent was not fit for nails, let alone offerings. I curse the day I traded with you." You laugh. The group laughs. It's practically a party game now. Spot the merchant missteps in historic clay. "Is this normal?" someone asks. Historians still debate just how unusual this cache of complaint tablets really is. Were they part of a personal archive? A bureaucratic hoard? Or simply a dusty drawer full of professional grudges? No one's sure. But what they do know is this. People keep these things, and centuries later they become artifacts. They become you. Your moment of anger, frustration, or petty elegance, preserved in dust and wedge strokes. You sip some beer as another guest pulls out a small box containing fragments of broken letters. One appears to be an ode to a delivery goat that arrived late and slightly concussed. Another has nothing but the phrase, "I told you not to trust him," repeated twice. possibly for dramatic effect. Then it happens. Your friend disappears into the back room and returns with a grin and a wrapped parcel. "I wasn't supposed to show this yet," he says, "but one of the scribes uncovered a new tablet near the warehouse ruins. They think it's yours." Your eyes go wide. He unwraps it gently. The clay is drier now, firmer. You recognize the wedge shapes immediately, uneven, a little angry but full of character. There it is. Your complaint to ea-nasir. Your words, still echoing, still sharp. It's surreal. To see something you created with heat and grumpiness now resting on a display mat like it's a precious family heirloom. Everyone leans in to read it, nodding appreciatively. Someone even whispers, "Oof." Brutal. You wonder what ea-nasir would think, knowing his name lives on not in glory but in customer service failure. That for all his years of trading, this is what remains. And you? You feel strangely proud. Your little tantrum has become history. Not a king, not a general, just a person who didn't like their copper and made sure everyone knew it. You glance around at the shelves of tablets in your friend's collection. Some are prayers, some are contracts, some are records of grain shipments so dull they could be used to put goats to sleep. But yours sings. It's a reminder that the small things matter, that complaints, frustrations, the daily grind of trying to live in a world filled with flaky copper, all of it deserves to be remembered. Someone asks if you'll write another. You consider it. Maybe. But this time, it'll be about that market stall that sold you pickled turnips with actual wasps inside. The night winds down. People share stories, swap clay puns, and snack on barley cakes shaped like tiny donkeys. You leave the gathering with a full stomach, a warm heart, and a renewed sense of petty legacy. Back home, you lie under the stars and whisper to yourself, "One day, archaeologists will read my rage." And smile. The next few days drift by like the slow, sticky syrup on a summer fig. You keep busy, patching a roof tile here, bartering for fish there. But your mind keeps circling back to one strange idea, that a simple clay tablet could outlast everything. And now that idea won't let go. So you visit the potter's workshop, not for bowls or jars this time, but for wisdom. Because the potter, Hemi Balat, is known for something more than cookware. He's an expert in firing tablets, the kind that last forever. You step into the shaded, kiln-warmed room and immediately feel your nose fill with the earthy scent of clay and singed wood. Shelves line the walls, each covered in drying goods. Painted jugs, figurines, little clay dogs with what appear to be very human expressions. Hemi greets you with a nod, one hand covered in slip. "Come for fire or gossip?" You grin. "A bit of both." You pull your complaint tablet from your satchel. It's hardened in the sun by now, but not baked. That's the trick. Sun-dried tablets are durable for everyday use, sure, but if you want something to survive flood, flame, time, and the slow erosion of memory, you bake it. He inspects your tablet like a priest reading omens. "This is angry clay," he says. You nod. "It deserves immortality." He agrees. Historians still debate how deliberate the long-term preservation of tablets was. Some believe tablets were fired mainly when intended for storage in temple archives or official state records. Others argue it was more situational. Fire happened, and what didn't burn hardened instead. But in places like this, where potters know what they're doing, it's clear. Permanence was an option. You watch as Hemi prepares the kiln. It's not a roaring fire like a blacksmith's, but a slow, even heat. He stacks the tablets carefully, your complaint nestled between a sales receipt for goat milk and a hymn to Ninhursag. It's strangely comforting, knowing your wrath sits beside dairy and devotion. As he works, Hemi talks. "Most people don't realize how fragile writing is," he says. "Ink fades, parchment rots, even memory lies, but clay keeps secrets." You nod. There's something oddly poetic about that. He tells you about a batch of tablets found in a ruined city once swept by fire. The flames destroyed buildings, furniture, even people. But the tablets? Baked into permanence by accident. A library of complaints and tax notes, sealed by catastrophe. Your tablet, he says, might survive the end of Ur. It's a heavy thought. You walk home later with clay dust on your hands and a quiet sort of reverence in your chest. Not religious exactly, just the awe of realizing that something you made, something you felt in a moment of fury, might be touched by someone 4,000 years from now. What will they think? Will they chuckle at your copper woes? Will they wonder what kind of person got this upset over a metal ingot? Will they picture you in your courtyard, hunched over a tablet, muttering about flakiness? You hope so, because the thing is, they'll know you existed. In a world of kings and gods and long-winded epics, your wedge-shaped complaint cuts through the noise with something simpler. Humanness. You were disappointed, you said so, and now that truth is preserved in dust and fire. Later that night, you sit with your cousin, watching stars crawl across the velvet sky. You tell him about the firing, about Hemi's quiet wisdom, about the strange thrill of knowing your words have become objects. He raises a brow. So, what now? You become a historian of irritation? Maybe, you say. Maybe I just start writing down every time I get annoyed. Better stock up on clay. You both laugh. The stars overhead blink lazily. Somewhere nearby, a reed flute plays a lullaby you half remember from childhood. And you sit there thinking not of ea-nasir or his shameful copper, but of the tablet now resting, warm from the kiln, cooled by time, and ready to face eternity. You'll sleep well tonight, knowing your voice, small as it may be, just got louder than time. A week passes, or bustles on with its usual rhythm. Markets opening at dawn, scribes grumbling into their barley porridge, and somewhere a donkey probably refusing to move until offered dried figs. But your world has changed just a little. Ever since that moment in Hemi-Balat's kiln, you've started seeing tablets differently. They're everywhere, of course, stacked in homes, tucked in temple vaults, shoved in sacks for long journeys. But now, when you pass one, you don't just see a clay rectangle. You see a whisper, a flicker of personality, a message from someone who, like you, just wanted to be heard. So when a friend invites you to the House of Tablets, the city's modest archive, you say yes without hesitation. It's not much to look at from the outside. Just a squat building near the ziggurat, walls the color of old onions and windows too narrow for comfort. But inside, it's quiet. Cool. The air smells of clay dust and old thoughts. You follow the curator, a stooped man with surprisingly nimble fingers, into the shelves. Here lie thousands of tablets, some organized, some not. They're categorized by source, subject, even mood, he claims. This shelf, he says, is mostly divorce settlements and shipping errors. Very high in emotional content. You chuckle and lean in. Each tablet is slightly different. Some are thick, square, and confident. Others are slim, delicate, a little wobbly, perhaps from a scribe's shaky hands or a rushed delivery. He shows you a few highlights. One is a list of perfumes offered to a goddess, with side notes about which blends made the priest sneeze. Another is a land deed featuring a handprint stamped next to the wedge marks. An early attempt at biometric ID, maybe? Then he pulls out a very familiar tablet. Your tablet. Your original complaint to ea-nasir. You blink. Already? He nods. The delivery boy passed it through the temple for validation. Somehow it ended up here. It's been categorized under consumer disputes, vigorous tone. You take it in your hands. It feels heavier now, not physically, but symbolically. You're part of the archive, your voice cataloged, your disappointment enshrined in clay. You gently set it back, and for a moment you feel oddly serene. Do you ever read them aloud? You ask. The curator grins. Every festival, people gather in the courtyard. We recite the funniest ones, Of course they do. Historians still argue whether the preservation of tablets like these was ever intended for humor, or if modern audiences simply can't help but laugh at ancient frustrations that sound so familiar. Either way, the effect is the same: the human condition preserved in clay. You move on, pausing at the shelf labeled unclaimed tablets. These are the ones that never reach their destination. Forgotten love notes, unsigned contracts, half-finished poems, and at least one furious tirade that ends abruptly mid-word, as if the scribe sneezed and gave up. One tablet catches your eye. It begins, "To the barley merchant who cheated me with a bag of stones." You smile, imagining the writer, face flushed, wedges flying fast, perhaps muttering to themselves in fury. You feel a kinship, a strange, peaceful kind of camaraderie with this anonymous complainer. Because that's what this room is in the end: a symphony of tiny frustrations, legal tiffs, market gossip, temple memos, and grocery lists that outlived their makers. It's humbling and empowering. You walk home that evening with clay dust on your sleeves and the sound of history echoing quietly in your thoughts. You think about how many people, thousands, maybe millions, have scribbled their complaints, hopes, and odd metaphors onto these small slabs. And how many more have read them, laughed, paused, understood. You glance at your own shelves, thinking perhaps it's time to start your own archive. Not just complaints, though those are satisfying, but little stories, recipes, jokes, thoughts worth preserving, because someday someone might read them. Someone might see you, and not as a name in a footnote or a footless statue in a museum, but as a person who once lived, once struggled with flaky copper, and once decided to write it all down. You wake before sunrise. Not because of the donkeys this time, though they're certainly arguing in the alley, but because you've had a dream. One where you were in a museum, staring at your own handwriting, surrounded by people speaking a language you didn't understand. They looked confused, amused. One pointed at the word flaky and laughed. You blink in the pale morning light, the dream still tugging at your thoughts. It's a strange feeling to imagine yourself as a curiosity, a case study, a glass-encased example. You stretch and step into your courtyard, where a small breeze ruffles the dust and your neighbor's cat glares at you from atop a grain jar. And you wonder, how far have I really come since writing that tablet? It started with copper, with anger, with indignation shaped into wedge marks. But now, standing here, you realize that what you really wrote was more than a complaint. It was a moment of connection between you and the world, between past and future, between you and, well, you. You smile, remembering the first stroke of the stylus, how awkward it felt. Now you find your fingers craving it. You grab a tablet, blank, cool, patient, and begin again. But this time, no rage. No petty flourish. Just a story. You write about your house, about the dog that keeps stealing sandals, about Taram Healy's eyebrow puns, about the smell of onions at the temple gate. You write because you can. Because someone, somewhere, might read it one day and say, "Oh, so they weren't that different from us." And that's the thing. Writing isn't always for fixing problems. Sometimes it's just for saying, "I was here." Historians still argue whether the Mesopotamians truly knew how eternal their tablets would become. But you've come to accept that whether your tablet ends up on a shelf, in a museum, or beneath a pile of collapsed bricks, it means something. You step outside, slip on your sandals, and begin walking to the scribe quarter. Maybe you'll find a new stylus. Maybe Taram Eli will want to co-write something funny. Maybe today you'll just help someone else shape their anger into wedges. You've become part of the system, no longer just a customer. You're a scribe-adjacent enthusiast of immortal pettiness, and that's not a bad place to be. Now take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Feel the quiet of ancient Ur settle around you like a blanket of warm dust and fading incense. The streets are still. The scribes have gone to sleep. The kilns have cooled, their fires banked for morning. Even the donkeys are silent now, just soft breaths and the occasional shuffle of hooves. You're lying back in your courtyard, the stars above glittering in slow, ancient constellations. Somewhere a breeze carries the scent of old clay and barley bread. Your tablet, the one you etched with such careful indignation, is resting nearby. Still. Whole? Timeless. And maybe, just maybe, in 1,000 years, someone will hold it in their hands and smile at your frustrations, your humor, your humanity. They'll see not just the copper drama, but the voice beneath it. The voice that says, I was here. I lived. I felt something. Let that thought cradle you now. Let it drift like the slow, sleepy flow of the Euphrates. Let your breath slow, your thoughts soften. The fire is out. The stylus is set aside. The past is patient, and tonight, it's peaceful. You are seen. You are remembered. And for now, you are safe. Sleep well, dear writer of wedges. Tomorrow will come. But for now, just rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.